questions?
Yes. Okay. No, you want to start? Okay. Oops. Okay.
Can I, to be fair, if this,
I would he has a-
since you've had a few times asked questions, but
I'll defer to him. No?
let you want. Let you.
Well, we'll keep going.
freedom of choice.
Okay. I have freedom of choice. Okay.
I tell you, the question may be short, but the answer may be long. So therefore, perhaps let's hear your question first, because I haven't heard his questions for quite some weeks.
Okay.
The answer is good question.
Okay. A lot of discussion about the Garden of Eden. It says explicitly, if you eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, this day, you will surely die. But it didn't happen. Forgetting the serpent for the moment. They both ate. They didn't die that day, that week, that month, and they lived a long, long time. So he says you will surely die. Doesn't happen. What's the answer?
No, using the concept which one has to use, that what is said in those first chapters has to be understood allegorically. So we could say esoterically, it's got a deeper meaning. But if you want to follow it, you see, I sometimes said in my school, I was abroad, I said, because many of the people there knew something of the Bible, didn't know much other things. So I said, we suffer from infantile paralysis, spiritually speaking, when it comes to understanding the Bible. In other words, many of us carry on and we think that the story is, it's put to little children. Little children read the story, Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden, there are beautiful trees, and God commanded them, they didn't know what God said. So, it got much deeper meaning. But let's continue, that's what we were discussing in the previous year, about freedom of choice and so on. But if you want to carry on with a simple language, because the Torah is there for little children as well, it's quite true, but you shouldn't remain with that infantile mental paralysis. You recognize when you get older, it's got a far deeper meaning. And the older you become, if you do increase your knowledge and understanding, you'll be surprised what beautiful, deep teachings are contained in those verses. But looking at it simply, like you're asking, it says simply, it's on the day when you eat, you will die, on that day. So, the truth is, man and woman were created on the sixth day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And on that sixth day, they sinned. And then Hashem said, you unfortunately have to die. What does death mean? You're going to a different world. And they were sent by Goresh, he drove them out of Gan Eden into a different world. Gan Eden is actually a world where you live above time, but you're driven away from that. It's where the body has a different. You're driven into a world. It says explicitly, he sent them out of Gan Eden. What's sending out of Gan Eden is similar to the way we speak today about people going to Gan Eden. Let's say a person lives on this just similar language is used. When the person dies, if he's fulfilled the will of God, where does he go? Into Gan Eden. We say it in our praise, Kermul Rachamim, Gan Eden. Yeah. It's Mitzvah Rachaim, it's the bond of life. What is death? Death means leaving the physical universe and going into a different planet, spiritual universe. So therefore, they died on that day, on the sixth day, on the day on which they were created. they could only continue living in that day, or even entering into the Shabbat from that day, which would be a high elevation, if they fulfill the will of Hashem. And therefore they have to, it says, it was even sent out of the gates of Gan Eden. The gates of Gan Eden were closed to them. And it even says there that Hashem placed there the two cherubs, yeah, to protect them from coming back. He said he put there the two cherubs to guard them, that they should not go back. They've got to stay out of Gan Eden. What life is outside Gan Eden is described to them. Outside Gan Eden, you won't have ready-made food from all the trees, as it was. You didn't have to work, you have to do physical work, you have to do spiritual work. But then you have to do physical work, and you'll have to go. What do they say? There's another thing that stops them getting back to Gan Eden. What is it? They had their sword, a flaming sword, turning all the time. So that the child means this is to protect them from getting back, it says explicitly. The deeper meaning, do you know what the deeper meaning is? You want to have the simple meaning. On that, literally they died on that day. And when a person then fulfills the will of Hashem entirely in this world, and he follows the way of the Torah, then he gets back to Gan Eden. Because the Kruvim, where do you find in the Mishkan? The Kruvim they are the protective power of the Shekhinah, which comes from the Holy Ark. And therefore, if your life is a life of Torah, it's a deeper meaning, you get back to Gan Eden. Anyway, what was your question?
My question goes back to yesterday. Yeah. Why the laws? Why is the laws? Because the law, the first thing was you shouldn't eat off the tree of knowledge. Now, God needs these laws, but why? Because man needs laws. The laws, nothing can exist without rules, without laws. Communism, whether it be communism, whether it be capitalism, you have to have a set of laws so that they can exist. And the same thing is with Kadosh Baruch Hu. Why does he need these sets of laws? Why does he need his Torah? Because if he didn't have his Torah, his rules also, he cannot be king without a set of rules. So we also have to keep these set of rules.
Don't understand the question. You're saying that it's necessary for human
It's necessary for rules, for communism, capitalism, and even the Kadosh Baruch Hu. He can't be king without having these rules.
Which rules?
The rules of the Torah.
That's why he gave
Communism, they make up their own. It's only the mind which is writing on.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so what's the question? You give me an answer. I don't. What? The answer is the Torah is necessary because mankind needs laws to live. The individual needs laws, and society needs laws. There's no laws, you have anarchy and destruction and decay. You want to build up life, build up individual life, family life, national life, international life, human life. You have to have laws. Now, the laws have to be based upon, what is it? There's another aspect. The laws have to be based, that everyone recognizes that anarchy creates destruction. If there's anarchy, there's no law and order whatsoever, then people, each one doing whatever he wants without consideration what harm he's doing to other people, it will create death and destruction, which is a lack of law and order. And any sensible human being recognizes the need. However, if the need for law and order is done in a way not in accordance with the No-Chad Code, which the No-Chad Code's principles reside in the human conscience, which God gave to man, but to make sure that it doesn't become distorted. So Hashem also revealed it to Noach, revealed it even to Adam HaRishon, according to the way one goes in more deeply, and that the moral conscience should not become suppressed by materialistic, physical desires, because human beings have been given also an evil inclination. Then sometimes you have a society that builds up laws on the basis of iniquity, like the Sodom and Amorah, that laws. Sodom and Amorah's laws were anti-chesed, that means anti-Hashem. And when it became too strong, said this society will have to be burnt up, it can't carry on. And the same applies to Hitler, Yamav Shemo. My father was a staunch lawyer, and he never took on a case which was not in accordance with his conscience. And he was quite a staunch citizen of Germany, and fought in the First World War and received the Iron Cross. So when Hitler started, he returned the Iron Cross, and even when it was just his beginning stages, he wouldn't have it. And he said the posuk which you will find in Tehillim, which we say on Tuesday morning, says Yasu Avel Alechok, which translated to English means they perform iniquity on the basis of law, which is one of the worst aspects of destruction. Anarchy, people destroy one another, straightforward. And that's what's happening today in the Muslim societies with anarchy. That's why they're killing one another, non-stop, with anarchy. There's no law and order at all. But when you get laws, such as Hitler introduced laws, that's how my father said he can't carry on staying in Germany, because the laws are based upon iniquity, making cruelty and oppression against the laws were against gypsies as well, gypsies and after the perverts and Jews, but it's all based on iniquity. And that he said before the Holocaust, and so during the so it became that. In fact, I owe my life to him for this, because in the family there was some, should stay here. And my uncle, for example, who was a rabbi in Frankfurt, not a lawyer, he came even after Kristallnacht, which is tonight, yeah? The 11th? Today's the 11th of November?
Yes, 11th.
Well, no, it was November the 10th. But I remember the 11th of the 10th, which we were in England, we used to say, remember which day of November? England. Anyway, Kristallnacht, when my grandfather's shul, he initiated that shul, which you remember, the biggest shul in Frankfurt, was burnt. So my uncle was rabbi of a shul in Frankfurt, and he came to us for a visit, and he said, well, he can't leave his community. He said the community needs him in these times of trouble. And he went back to Frankfurt, and the Nazis killed him. It's lost his life. All his children came to Israel, all very early, even before Hitler. They recognized what's happening in Israel. And one daughter came to England. She stayed with us a great deal, and she survived. Later came to Israel. But in our family, we owe our life to the fact that my father recognized the Modia, Yasu Aval Alechok. So you've got to have law and order. But Hashem knows the weakness of mankind. So in his fantastic chesed, he revealed to us the highest way of law and order, following the highest levels of morality for the individual and for mankind. And that's the Torah. The wisdom given the Creator himself is one who knows best. What is best for the individual, there's a battle between his soul and his body, and what's best for a family, what's best for a nation, what's best for the human race. And it's our choice to pick it up. Hashem said, you must choose, because if you don't have any choice, you're just a robot. So Hashem made us not into robots. We're not robots. We've got freedom. And freedom is the way to develop the highest spiritual talents that exist within each human being. So for that you need to follow the way of Hashem. So, if we can go, if we can, I would like now to continue with Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, because of all the moralists in Jewish history, his writings until today are one of the greatest inspirations to develop one's moral behavior and to change one's character. So it's so let's continue with the way in which he demonstrates us. You can give them up. The way in which the essence of the Torah is to bring the human being to the highest level of knowledge and understanding in the moral sphere. Learning Torah brings sanctification. But often perhaps you might think, okay, we're now in Brachot, it's easier because nearly all the matters that are discussed there, either they are deeper moral teachings, one way or another, taken from so many different aspects, both of the Tanakh, the whole of the Bible, and the oral traditions. And the other aspect which we find is halacha, which deals with prayer, so it's easier to understand. But let's say you start learning and spending a lot of time, as people in yeshiva do, in kollel, learning what should be done when the ox damages and gores a cow. Many discussions concerning details. Then there's the question, even as a child, the best system is to learn Tanakh and Mishnayos first. And the first Gemara children will learn is the third chapter about Matzia, which deals with returning lost articles, which goes in a lot of detail. What's yours, what's mine, debate. That the concept, he wants to get something from his fellow man, makes a claim, he's got to bring the proof. So that's all right for lawyers, maybe. What have they got to do with religion? In fact, I know there was once a story in America, some neighbor, a bar mitzvah boy, when a bar mitzvah comes and gives a long dissertation on a legal question when there's a dispute between two parties concerning whom does the apartment belong to, whom does the diamond belong to. He gave a whole discussion, legal discussion. And this was attended, because the father was a lawyer, by some of the head professors of law. And they said, what is this boy? It's boy it's 13. There are some non-Jewish lawyers as well. This boy of 13, what, is preparing to become a lawyer? Yeah, you really want thinking of that? And how did they start so early? Is that what you study? In your school you study at the age of 6 and 7, you start studying what is the law? I couldn't understand it. And but we know why do we have it? Because we've got to train. You see, you might say it's got nothing directly to do with morality, but in a certain way it does, because what is yours is very much a question with children, especially because children reach an age when they start thinking. Even before they start thinking, they think whatever they find is for them. They take it And then when they go into kindergarten, there are often arguments, it's my toy. You pick it up. And have to get the realization, there's my toys and your toys. And you find something in the street, don't think that the finding is keeping. They used to say with children, I suppose you remember as well. Finding is keeping. I found it. So the other youngster, the other toddler says, what do you mean? Yeah. Finding is keeping. My mummy gave it to me. What do you mean? So you have to sort it out from childhood. Because in life, we go on with this concept, finding is keeping. In business as well, using different, more adult means to hide the fact that it's not really mine. So it applies to everything. It applies to we're not guilty of stealing openly, but the person comes, but we are sometimes guilty, perhaps not thinking enough. We pick up, we go to lunch, and we forget the fact that the cook prepares for a certain number of people. Yeah, I'm very hungry now, so I'll take myself an extra portion. Well, it's a bit of stealing, because you might find out first if there's enough for everybody else. And sometimes you try and take the best food, I come here first come, first serve, right. So I'll help myself to a double portion of this food that everybody likes. Yeah. Or there's another occasion, let's say we make a noise at night. Yeah, and to disturb somebody else's sleep. Sometimes by mistake, but sometimes purposely by mistake. One mixing with the other, we make a noise. We say, I can make a noise. Doesn't disturb anybody. I wouldn't be disturbed by such a noise. So, therefore, just like I don't mind if somebody else makes a noise, so therefore I can make a noise. When Hillel said that, that which is hateful unto you, do not do unto your fellow man, it did not mean your personal likes and dislikes. You want to consider what the other person likes and dislikes. So all these things we learn through learning the Gemara, although it's very indirect. But there's something else with this Moshe Chaim Luzzatto with these books wants to show something else. That he is world famous in the Jewish world, in any case, for his fantastic moral books. I'm sure many of you have already learned or are learning. Mesilat Yesharim or Derech Hashem is the major works which are on a high moral level. So he shows that learning Gemara is really the source. But the method of learning Gemara, as we already explained, is to look at things objectively. In other words, to search for the truth. You have to search for moral truth. And the search for moral truth means you've got to train your mind to look at things objectively. Not from the point of view of your personal likes and dislikes. From the point of view of what is ultimately true. And we say that the seal of Hashem is Barak, Hashem is emet, it's truth. We have to drive the seed of Hashem into all our ways of thinking. And therefore, it's also important to get into the concept of debate. Because debate, as we say, clarifies the truth. The truth is that the legal system in the whole world is based upon having both sides to a disagreement, even both as disagreement, whether it's disagreement amongst two parties, or whether there's a person being accused. You have to have an accuser and a prosecutor, and a defender. So you have the defendant lawyer and the prosecuting lawyer. And if there's somebody who's so many sides to say it's certainly guilty of this and that, you must allow a defense in order to come to the true decision. And that does not only apply in courts, It applies in daily life and everything. But we often condemn people, we often judge people unfavorably. You've got to learn to judge people, the chavzachut, always the good side has to be stronger than the bad side, in all our view of other people. But still, we've also been given, two eyes. One eye with which to see good things, the right eye, and the left eye with which to see evil things. Why do we need to look at it? Yemin or small? Yemin is the right side. Is that really Yemin comes from the word root which means to appoint, with the appointed purpose. Small is Samael. The left side is a Satan, it's poison. Hashem has created fruits that give health, He's created poisons. One of the reasons He created poisons is to keep away the insects that might damage the fruit. Which are poison. A lot of poisons are there in order to, poisons and thorns are there in order to preserve nice flowers and sometimes to preserve the tree from things that attack the tree. The same applies in all areas of life, even in a person's own being. It's got things that it's got also the ability to show anger. But there's certain things where you should not be able to show anger. Otherwise, if parents, for example, they tolerate every mischief of a youngster, then they are spoiling him. Spoiling means ruining him. And many children become ruined because the parents give in to whatever fancy, however decayed and evil it is, the children want. Even with some parents, they can't control their children, even in their overeating of candies and sweet things that ruin their digestion. Many children become sick because the children let them eat whatever they want, whenever they want. The children become sick. So you've got to say no. Your right hand has to bring people near, and your left hand has to bring people far, bring habits far. So you have to do it. So you have to be, in all these judgments, you've got to be objective, not subjective. You shouldn't be angry because you shouldn't be angry inside. The anger is just destructive. But you have to sometimes show anger. If you don't show anger, people think of it. If you don't protest, people think it's okay. Okay, if you don't protest when people don't get up in the morning for davening, and you don't do everything possible to wake them out of their laziness, then you're not doing your duty. In a place where you're responsible, the people should get up in the morning and get on with whatever job they have to do in life. Parents and teachers have to follow this balance objectively. So, but to have objectivity, you've got to look at everything from all sides. So with this we'll introduce here the chelkei masa matan yisovetav, the elements of dialogue. So we already spoke about masa or matan. Omnam chelkei masa or matan haroshim. Please ask you to look inside. As a result, you learn Hebrew, and you'll also Otyot machimot, the letters, sages say, make you wise. A good way of making a stronger impression to remember the subject. So, the different parts of debate, of give and take, shemehem nivnot, asugyot kulan, b'chol Talmud, on the basis of which the different discussions in the whole of the Gemara take place. So let me speak of the word sugya. Today the word sugya is used for the way in which in the Gemara you have different sugya, different debates, sometimes extending over a few lines and sometimes extending over quite a few pages in the Gemara. They make one sugya. That means it's a thread. In learning Gemara, it's like this. If you really want to get into it, it's very difficult for a person who's learning a sugya to follow it unless he doesn't miss out part of it. Because often there's a long thread. Even let's say today it's something a bit simpler, but the whole sugya of the watches of the night is really one sugya. Yeah. In that sugya, that someone's bringing things by the side, but the sugya is the watches of the night, which starts off. The trigger is when it says in the Mishnah. Rabbi Lezer says you can read Kriyat Shema till when?
Eliezer says until the end of the first Shmuah.
End of the first watch. So therefore we begin a quick discussion of the watches of the night. So we go into the question of the where is it mentioned in the Tanakh. You go through different, say, we don't concentrate so much on the watches in all Gidon had, but we do extend it to the way in which the watch was mentioned by King David, and how he composed. Go into the question how he composed this Tehillim. Not only that, we then come to how did he give the monarch, give direction to the nation when there was the economic collapse, what they should do. That's going to be the next part of the sugya. And then we go into the other aspects of the watches. One sugya. So the sugyas, how are they built? He said they're built with 7 different types of statements. A memra, that's a statement. She'ila, there's many statements. Ma'ama, they are made from ma'ama. Ma'ama is a statement. Then you have she'ila, you have question and answer. Question and answer in the Gemara is generally introduced by the words of iboiru. To ask in Aramaic is liboi. And the shuva is the answer. There's question and answer. Then you have stira, which means
Contradiction.
the contradictions. That's introduced the word romindi. A statement is made, and someone brings a contradictory statement. Then you have to resolve it. And the stira is also a teshuva. Then ra'aya, then there's a question of bringing proof for one of the sides. And then kusha v'terut, which is introduced in the Gemara by the word, always says matkiv. Matkiv is a kasha against a certain statement, and the terut is the answer. And the reason why this is important for so many of you who take a Gemara and you didn't properly study Art Scroll, and you take a Gemara without punctuation, and then you can't read the Gemara. Why can't you read the Gemara? Because it didn't make punctuation. So I suggest everyone, that's why I'm very keen, when you start learning Gemara, whichever way you do it, the different ways suggested, but you should have special signs. You can use your own signs. Some people use signs with a colour. Got the background ink. So it's a question, you do green. An answer, you do blue, or whatever. But other simple ways also. A question, make a question mark. And an answer, make a check mark. And then to disprove of something, a proof or disproof, it's a kasha, you go and make an X. So you can make marks. At least make marks where there's a comma. So some people take out a Gemara and there's no punctuation marks at all. You don't know where to start and where to finish. So it's very important. So what the truth is that these 7 points that Moshe Chaim Luzzatto mentions here. Afterwards, he divides them into many more. He subdivides them. And of course, and my suggestion is that you don't have to follow exactly the pattern that he proposed and all throughout these. Nevertheless, it gives you a means whereby each person can use the method that suits him best to be able to recognize the kasha intent. There's some people, like we have a little book called Aids to Talmud Study, where there is a list, it's a number of books. Aids to Talmud Study, one to Rabbi Carmel, this is perhaps the simplest one, straightforward, which just gives a list of the key words. When you memorize the key words, then it becomes straight sailing. If you have it in memory clearly, a key word, then you can even take an unseen. If you've done it on 3 pages of the Gemara thoroughly, afterwards each page will come easier, and if you start going ahead with this in your mind, since there are many pages in the Gemara, you could even have an unseen page of the Gemara, and you'd be able to work on it. So especially you've got Rashi. It's also Rashi doesn't give all the punctuation marks, but he's the greatest aid for all the vocabulary which you need to learn in the Gemara. Therefore, the best way, of course, is to learn Ulpan thoroughly, and in the Ulpan also Chumash with Rashi, as it's done in our Ulpan, where it shows you how to read it and the grammar and so on. And that's the basis then to have a straightforward path, Rashi on the Gemara. But failing that, it's very important for people who want to take the crash courses. The people who didn't learn in Shiva from childhood, and they've got already developed mind, Baruch Hashem, and they know how to study, so the study in Yeshiva give a crash course. I've known a student in Yeshiva who took it that way, and in 1 year they could catch up with people who've been learning for years, for more years, many more years than the student had been involved in Torah. The student learning for 10, 15 years, and this person takes a proper crash course with a mature mind. If he uses systems that make it, today there's so many aids, you can get through it quickly. Of course, it shouldn't be like we heard last week from a brilliant speaker who said that at the average Daf Yomi Shir, who understands the Shir? There's only one person who said might understand the Shir.
Teacher.
It's the one who teaches it. So if you teach something, you'll know it better. Therefore, at an early time in your crash course, you should also become teachers. It's a good thing. And here in Yeshiva, even a complete beginner can become a teacher. If the complete beginner already knows a few mitzvahs and already knows the Aleph Beit, he can teach the 1 or 2 who arrive and don't know the mitzvahs at all, and don't know an Aleph from a Beit. So everyone has a chance to become a teacher, have a good chavruta, and also learn from teachers. So now let's go on to the Perush. What is Meimra? Is Sheoma Omer Mamar Echad. He divides it as follows. There can be one person mentioned in the Gemara, one Tana, or it's all gotten, which makes a statement. Sheila Shivach Jechad Me'echad. He did in a question, and frequently, one Amora asks the other one for an answer. But it says, boy, Rova Me'apai. So Apai asked Rova. Rova gave him the answer. You also see the Gemara, you see many partners. You become familiar with them. And that partnership went over many pages of the Gemara. Like we have Abai and Rova. And you have Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish. There's even biographical aspects to this. there's a constant dialogue between the two greatest scholars. The greatest scholars, they tried their best to have a chavruta, a strong kedei lechachava, says pick up on. Acquire for yourself a chavruta. A chavruta can become very strong, both in each one, sharpening the other one's intellect. Do you know the romantic story concerning Rabbi Yochanan ben Shlokish? Yes, you know it. And then, by and large, there's so many episodes, strong chavruta. And you should know, what about Hillel and Shammai? They were also chavruta to some extent. They had a different outlook. Even they say, to go more deeply, that Rav Hillel and Shammai, it's the first Zugot mentioned Pick Avot. Pick Avot mentioned the chain of tradition. So it mentions Moshe received the Torah from Hashem and passed it on to his greatest disciple Yeshua. Then Yeshua passed it on to the elders, the 70 elders, who were on the highest level of the chain of the oral tradition. And they passed on to the prophets. There were groups. Then it says the prophets passed it on to the men of the Knesset HaGdolah, the great assembly. Some wonder, why did they call it great assembly? Isn't enough to say the assembly? Why the great one? How many members were in the great assembly? 120. So I think there could be a reason. For many things in the Torah we only understand when we start experiencing them in time, in order to contrast it with another Knesset, which is what? Which is the Knesset? The Knesset?
Parliament.
Pardon? The Parliament is the Knesset. How many members?
120.
120. So therefore, it's emphasized, don't make the mistake to think that the Knesset we have today is great. It could only become great if you follow the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, the men of the Great Assembly. And why is it true? There are certainly other reasons why it's given the name Gedolah. But anyway, what did they do, Anshe Knesset HaGdolah? They instituted so many things which have brought about the survival of Jewish communities and Jewish people. Because they introduced most of the prayers. Because the element of prayer in the early days was a bit different. Most of the prayers, they introduced the saying of Kaddish. They introduced some of the laws of the Shiva. It's the same in my shul, when I had some members who said, where is this written in the Bible? What you're telling us. If it's not written in the Bible, I don't need to keep it. These rabbis, they decided things on the basis of their opinions. So I also have an opinion. They introduced the second-day Yom Tov, which caused me problems in business. I don't believe in it anymore. It was issued by who are these people? So the only time, I say, when they introduced many other things for the Jews, they saw it was necessary because the 10 tribes had become lost. And the remnant of Jewry that came to the land of Israel was a small part of the dispersion. Jews were dispersed, some in Europe and most of them in Babylon. That's where they stayed, even the Second Temple period. So they knew they had to make things that will bring about the continuity of the Jewish people. They build up a Beit Knesset. That's also all the laws of Beit Knesset, nearly all of them, were introduced by the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah. So then we find the chain goes on. Shimon Tzaddik was the greatest power. He was the high priest and the high scholar. And he was able to stop the Hellenists swamping Eretz Israel. His successors became more difficult. And then it says, afterwards, Zubot, pairs. The pairs were generally the head of the Sanhedrin, the Nasi, the president, and the Av Bet Din, the father of the court, and the president of the court. And these were zugot, called pairs. So in other words, from then onwards, the leadership went to pairs. And afterwards, even when the power of the Sanhedrin was weakened, and even in the great scholars of the Talmud, first the Tanaim, generally the leaders were in pairs, and after Amoraim also, the leadership was even when there was no Sanhedrin, like in Babylon there was no Sanhedrin, but the greatest scholars were two people. Two people who were in constant contact with one another and also brought great power to the Sanhedrin and to the other Jewish communities. So this is the importance of having the ability always to debate every question with someone else. So we have Javier, we'll have to continue tomorrow's time.
Have a nice day.
Continue the dialogue.